In our last set of notes, we talked about the characteristics of living things. In the characteristics of living things, we talked about the cell as the smallest unit that is considered alive. And now in the levels of organization, though, we did talk about there are smaller things that make up an organism. And one thing we're going to talk about today are elements. Now, the chapter itself is called The Chemistry of Life. And in chemistry, you start talking about matter. Matter is anything that has mass and takes up space. Okay? Any living thing is included in it is matter. Below you have examples of matter and examples of things that are not matter because they don't have mass and take up space. I said we were going to talk about the elements. There are 92 different elements in nature. But in living things, we're going to focus on a couple specific elements. There are 11 elements in a living thing. We are going to focus on the 5 most common, which are carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and phosphorus. In living things, most living things are most abundant is hydrogen and then oxygen. We're really going to focus in the next coming week on carbon, and then there's some other trace elements in living things. Now, in the biosphere, which we talked about, is the entire Earth, which has living things in it. Elements have to move, and they are never used up. They are always recycled, and we call the cycles that they move through biogeochemical cycles. They're called biogeochemical cycles because it's broken up to 3 different things. Bio, which means they move through living things. Geological, or geo, they move through the Earth's features, such as rocks and different landforms. And then you have chemical, and they move through chemical reactions, such as like carbon will move through the atmosphere by being released as carbon dioxide that we breathe out. The biogeochemical cycles that we're going to talk about are the water cycle. The water cycle is important because we know that water is H2O, so that's going to move the hydrogen and oxygen throughout the biosphere. We're also going to talk about the carbon, how carbon enters into the atmosphere when we breathe out carbon dioxide, how it's also taken out of the atmosphere by plants when they take in that carbon dioxide. It's also, we put it into the air when different factories burn things that puts carbon dioxide into the air. So we'll talk about how the carbon moves. We're also going to talk about nitrogen. Nitrogen is the most abundant gas in the air, but living organisms can't use it. So we'll talk about how living organisms can actually get it in their body and use it. And then the last one is going to be phosphorus. And this is mainly a geological cycle. And we'll talk about how that gets into living things. What you need to do now is follow the links on the PowerPoint and Canvas, and you are going to watch a video over each of these cycles, and be prepared to answer some questions over each of the videos in class on Monday.